Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Another week, another episode. This is Stats Over Politics. As always, I'm your host, Sean Holko, alongside my guy, Mr. Jaevon Toddy. And back for another week are a couple of familiar voices that if you tuned in to episode 179 last week, then you already know who these guys are, but I'll introduce them once again. None other than two-time Super Bowl champion, Mr. Mack Irvin III is here with us, and also six-time Super Bowl champion Emiliano Lara, who may be feeling a little somber today given the outcome of yesterday's game. But before we get to our guests, I want to get to my guy, Mr. Jaevon Toddy. How you doing today?
Feeling good. Kid's birthday was past week. Happy birthday, son. My niece's birthday is actually on the same day as my son's birthday. So happy birthday, Nyla. Happy birthday, Mako. And it was also Brother Bear's birthday yesterday. So happy birthday to Brother Bear. And today is also Kyle's birthday, who's also been on the show. Another Seattle fan, actually, which is kind of crazy. So happy birthday to everybody. A lot of birthdays in the month of February.
Lots of birthdays, and Kyle took $40 from me from week 18 to the divisional round. And so I even shot him a text yesterday. Didn't hear back from him, so he was probably partying hard and enjoying the win. Happy birthday to Kyle, Mako, Nyla, and Brother Bear. And even though it's not a Victory Monday for our San Francisco 49ers, this became an iconic image and even a meme for us on the podcast of Mako. We would display this, and this is why you got to tune in on YouTube, Twitch, or Instagram so you can see what I'm talking about. But iconic image of Jaevon's son, Mako, that we displayed on every 49ers Victory Monday, but had to throw it on the screen to celebrate his second birthday. Happy birthday, Mako. Now throwing it to a guy who is actually celebrating Victory Monday, and he'll be celebrating Victory Monday for about the next 7 months or so. Actually, if you're like Kevin, then he's going to be celebrating it for the next year. But none other than Mr. Mack Irvin III. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, on top of the world. Can't say we expected this at the start of the season, but it's always good to pick up another Lombardi. And the way we did it, the route we did it, the schedule was truly the Hollywood ending for us. So I was feeling really good right now.
Yeah, it really did line up like a Disney movie. And we'll get to all those storylines in a little bit. But before we get to it, I wanted to check in on Emiliano. I want to know how you're feeling, status update. What's the vibe for today?
I'm feeling pretty good, all things considered. I'll be honest. When the game started, I was pretty optimistic. I was really looking forward to being able to celebrate a 7th Super Bowl win. But it was pretty quick, that I won't go as far to say we were exposed. I lean more towards Seattle was just such a good team. I just think that there's so many years where the best team doesn't make it to the Super Bowl. And I think that this year was just one of those years. Best team in the NFL made it, and they very clearly, especially defensively, they earned it. They earned that Lombardi. So the hats off. Absolute terrific win.
Yeah, they certainly did. At the beginning of the season, no one would have thought that the Seahawks would finish the season as the best team in the NFL, but I think it's safe to say that it's undisputed, as you were saying. And I can't remember if you said this in our pre-show chat or once we went live, Emil, but no one expected the Patriots to be in that place yesterday. No one expected the Seahawks to be there yesterday when you look back on how the season started. And so the fact that both teams went from missing the playoffs last year to playing in the Super Bowl yesterday is an achievement in itself. And as you said to me earlier, Emil, on text, 31 teams end their season with a loss. Only one team can end their season with a victory, and that team was the Seattle Seahawks. So let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's get right into it as the Seahawks beat the Patriots 29-13. Mac, I'm going to throw it to you first because you are the reigning, defending, undisputed Super Bowl champion now for, again, about another year. Actually, 370 days because next year the Super Bowl is going to be on Valentine's Day. So with it being February 9th, you got over a year to celebrate. And that's if the Seahawks don't do it again next year. And I'm going to knock on wood, hoping that that doesn't happen. Nevertheless, your team are the reigning champions, Mac. And so could you just break down the game from your perspective and also the season in its entirety, as you were alluding to, regarding kind of just the storybook ending?
So for the game itself, I was feeling optimistic going into the game for the reasons I laid out last week. I felt like Seattle, out of the playoff teams, once you got to the divisional round, I felt like Seattle was top to bottom the most complete team left in the playoffs. When you look at offense, when you look at defense, when you look at special teams, and I felt like all three of those elements were on display yesterday. Maybe not the offense. The offense was the real shaky part of the game for us, but that defense came through almost exactly like I thought they would. I was actually a little surprised to the extent that they were able to shut down Drake May and limit the Patriots' opportunity to move the ball down the field. But as I said, that front seven is nasty. You look at everybody on there. I think almost everybody on that front seven had a hand in at least one of the sacks or one of the pressures, and they made Drake May's life a living hell for 4 quarters of the game. When you get to the offensive side of the ball, obviously Kenneth Walker had these last 3 games have been really special from him. And especially coming into a contract year, I think when you look at Seattle's financials next year, he's a prime candidate for the franchise tag, especially with losing Charbonnet. I feel like they have to hold on to him because, you saw his performance yesterday is part of the big reasons why this game didn't feel close for most of the game. Darnold, he had a good season. It didn't really shine in the Super Bowl yesterday, but he did what he had to do when it mattered the most. No turnovers, which was critical. And he was able to eventually get a touchdown in the 4th quarter at A.J. Barner. Just a complete game, and especially the special teams. I want to give a shout out Jason Myers, record field goals in a Super Bowl. Michael Dixon, the punter, was able to pin the Patriots down in the red zone almost every drive. And when you look at New England's starting position on the field, you got to give a shout out to the special teams. I felt like every performance of the game, every aspect of the game, every aspect of the team came together, and you saw that in the result yesterday. For the season, as I said, the Niners and the Rams have been making fools of us for the past, let's say, 5 years. It's been really bad. Ever since that 2020 season where we went 12-4 and went out in the first round to the Rams, the Seahawks haven't been that upper echelon team. They've always kind of been in contention, but they've either snuck into the playoffs or missed it on tiebreaker, or they had a 2021 season where they only won 10 games. So they made a decision. They had to move on from Pete Carroll. They brought in Mike McDonald. They overhauled the roster. Still suffered a brutal week 1 loss to the Niners that I felt could have been prevented by one player. And Reek Woolen almost had a flawless Super Bowl, almost. But my dad said he was flying under the radar into the 4th quarter, and then he immediately had 2 big passes dropped on him. So that's just typical Reek Woolen. But when you look at the rest of the season, we were in every game. If we weren't blowing out teams, we were always keeping it close. Taking the Rams down and the 49ers to end the season, become the number 1 seed, especially after all the talk that we heard, the Rams were the team to beat this season. Then after we beat them, it was like, the 49ers, if they went out, they're the number 1 seed and they have the home Super Bowl. It's the perfect story for them. And they kept overlooking the story for Seattle, how they could knock the Niners down, knock the Rams down. They beat the Niners down in the divisional round, dropped 40 on them. They'll never forget that. The Rams, we were able to beat them in the NFC Championship game, and we were able to exact a form of revenge on the Patriots on San Francisco's home field, smoke victory cigars in their locker room, lift the Lombardi on their field. I just think you couldn't have wrote it any better for Seahawks fans the way this season played out, and they're going to hold that over their divisional rivals for a long, long time.
Yeah, they certainly will. And as you were saying there, Mac, the Seahawks smoked cigars in the 49ers locker room, not once, but twice. This time was actually in the 49ers locker room, unlike in week 18 when they smoked the cigars in the visitors locker room. And immediately after that game, when the Seahawks clinched the NFC West, there was the media asking George Kittle at the podium, like, hey, the Seahawks are on Instagram Live right now. They're smoking cigars in the visiting locker room. Like, does that bother you at all? And George, to his credit, said, no, congrats to them. If I was in their position, I'd be doing the exact same thing. And George, in a way, challenged the Seahawks and said, we'll see if because I think there was another report that the Seahawks left some cigars in the locker room, or they did something in that regard, just basically prepping to come right back. And we've heard stories like that in the past where teams have left an item in the locker room, like, we're coming back when we're here for the Super Bowl. And that's what the Seahawks did. And they went on to not only smoke cigars again at Levi Stadium for the second time this year, but they did it in the 49ers locker room, which is just making my stomach turn. It was brutal if you're a 49ers fan. But kudos to the Seahawks. You know, Toddy and I, we got to take it on the chin. But when it comes to the Patriots, to get all the way there, I know that you're feeling pretty happy with the season in its entirety, Emil, but does that like erase the sting of the loss? Like, you said that you came into the game feeling pretty optimistic, and then you saw it for what it was. The Seahawks defense took over, as we experienced as 49ers fans, not once but twice in a 3-week span. And so this Seahawks defense is elite. Just like I told Mac after that divisional game, it just felt like the Seahawks were going to go on to win it all, and they completed the story. But does the fact that the Seahawks shouldn't have even been there erase the sting at all for you, Emil? Or is it still tough waking up today knowing that your team lost in the Super Bowl? Because I've experienced that, and Jaevon has experienced it now 3 times in the last 10, 15 years, somewhere around there. And so I think technically 13, whatever. I've experienced it a lot. So has Jaevon. And so I know the feeling all too well. You seem to be handling it a lot better than I have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, right? One, you have to take it as it is. There was no foul play. There was no, not like maybe some of these Niners Chiefs Super Bowls that we've seen recently, where you can look back and say, if this call was made differently, if one more catch had been made, if CMC doesn't fumble the ball, like this game was not like that at all. Like, you cannot point to one thing, maybe besides Will Campbell, but I mean, the poor rookie just had it coming a little bit. You can't point to just one thing and say like, oh, if the Patriots had just done this one thing, the game would have been totally different. And I take that away as a positive to say, like, you were just outmatched. I mean, it can't feel that different than, when the Niners played the Seahawks just a few weeks ago. You must have left that game saying, yeah, you know what? We showed up today and the Seahawks were just simply the better team. Like, they straight, BTA, just no questions
from
asked.
The opening kickoff.
Yes. And that's what almost made the middle of the third quarter harder for me, was that we were right there. And I was just like, this is going to be one of those things that, like, the Seahawks are clearly the better team, but the Patriots just, squeak it out. And then that it was just the death by 1,000 cuts till the fourth quarter, and then they just seemed to turn it on. I know that the box score looks like the fourth quarter was close. I think you have to keep me honest, but I think both of those touchdowns came in like the first 6 minutes of game time. And then it just felt like that the second half of the fourth quarter was just, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. The only thing that I will say more about the Seahawks is that I absolutely love how the team is built. I love the head coach. I mean, I think you get just a couple key signings, but Mac, I don't know the Seahawks roster all that well, but from an outsider looking in, you guys did a lot of this through the draft, and then you just dropped Sam Darnold into what was already such a strong roster, and that's the kind of team that wins the Super Bowl. Always love to see that. Some of their most key players they drafted rather than, having signed or traded for. So always love to see that. And then I don't know if you were asking the second question, kind of where we go from here.
And just your overall emotions, and then where you go from here. Because I mean, having Drake May being a second-year quarterback, 22 years old or something like that, like, he could be back here several more times and win it a couple times, or he could never return, just like Dan Marino. So how are you feeling in that regard?
Right away, I kind of was comparing it to the Burrow situation. Really young, a team that probably shouldn't have made it there, but Burrow carried that team to the Super Bowl, and you could just tell that just Burrow and that offense just simply ran out of gas. I cannot avoid the fraud comments. I think at a certain point, again, I'm not going to go as far to say that we were exposed. Other teams had worse, schedules than us. Other teams played similar schedules than us. They could have made it to the Super Bowl just like we did. But you did just get to a point where I just keep repeating myself, but they were just better. So I walk into next season saying, hey, we know what we need to fix. Offensive line, get Drake May a real weapon. All credit to Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins and Kayshon Boutte. We'll see what happens, but get him a real weapon, and then get some legit edge rushers. We had great pressure this season, and I think it even showed up a couple times, in last night's game. Some decent pressure, but just actually getting sacks consistently, and having just one guy that the offensive line has to focus on. Milton Williams is great in the middle, but having someone on the edge who, maybe a Max Crosby, we'll see, would just be, I think, how we find ourselves back here. But we'll see.
Yeah, mentioning Joe Burrow could seem optimistic at first, but then when you look at how the last 3-4 years for Joe Burrow has gone since he appeared in that Super Bowl so young, it makes me a little weary for the Patriots kind of looking forward with that kind of comparison. But I think it definitely depends on if Joe Brady is a boom or bust head coach for the Bills, because otherwise the Patriots are going to run away with that division, because I'm not a believer in Jeff Hafley hired in Miami, or things haven't gone well for the Jets in a really long time. And we saw Sam Darnold was a product of that as he kind of got stuck there in purgatory. Nevertheless, Jaevon, I want to toss it to you next because you've been very patient. You and I are the unbiased ones on this panel. Obviously, I've made it very clear my hate and disdain for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm sure you feel similarly, but neither of our teams were competing in the Super Bowl yesterday. And so just what was your reaction to the game itself?
So I want to give a shout out to Mac for mentioning that week 1 win that we had against the Seattle Seahawks. When we were at our healthiest, next couple times we played, not so much.
Kittle even got hurt in that game too.
Hey, man. But I get yesterday was in the Niners Stadium. That game could have been played in Antarctica. It could have been played on the Pacific Ocean. It would have went the exact same way. Seattle's tendencies, it kind of showed throughout the game just on how they play. Like, they can rush 4 and get to the quarterback pretty easily. Drake May was under duress the entire game. Even when we played in Seattle a couple weeks ago when the Niners played, Brock Purdy had no time to throw the ball. You could look at Will Campbell and say, hey, Will Campbell was struggling. He's a rookie. It wasn't all on him, but I think there were some instances where he was getting beat. He was getting bull rushed by DeMarcus Lawrence. But I just think when you have the ability to rush 4 and get to the quarterback, you kind of have it. You have an unfair advantage to the quarterback because you could allow your DBs to drop. You have coverage on the outside. Like, it's kind of like everything is pretty much covered. And you have guys like Evan Moria. You have guys like Tariq Woolen making plays. Devon Witherspoon, who was top. He was top 5, I believe, in the draft day he was taken. A lot of people were questioning that pick. You gotta give credit to Joe, to Schneider. His draft picks, like, if you look at all of his draft picks, they've all hit. Like, on the defensive end, you're looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kenneth Walker. You're looking at guys, and obviously signing Sam Darnold from the Minnesota Vikings, it was a match made in heaven. And Sam Darnold, albeit he didn't really do anything that kind of wowed you yesterday, he didn't turn the ball over. You saw Kyle Shanahan say in his not press conference, and like he was featured on the pregame, and he was basically saying if Sam Darnold does not turn the ball over, they're gonna blow them out, basically. And he couldn't have been any further from from what transpired yesterday. And yeah, man, I mean, Kenneth Walker, this entire playoff run, he's been probably the MVP of the playoffs, if you're not including Matt Stafford. I mean, just what he's been doing, game in and game out, scored in every single game except yesterday, the touchdown I got called back. I know a lot of people lost money on that, but I do think him coming back is going to be a really big deal. Mac mentioned him getting franchise tagged. I'm kind of looking at the finances of the Seattle Seahawks. They're not really paying anybody any much. Usually when a team is winning the Super Bowl, you're looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, my quarterback's making $50 million. My star wide receiver is making 40, 35. That's not the case with the Seattle team because you have a lot of young players still on their rookie deals. So I feel like a guy like Kenneth Walker can get signed to a long-term contract, but I don't think he's going to reset the market. You look at guys like Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey. I think one of the higher contracts too was like Alvin Kamara, but I'm looking at a guy like Christian McCaffrey. I think he's making like 19, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I wouldn't put Kenneth Walker in that category. He'd be like somewhere in the middle, maybe like 13-ish, 12. I guess that'll all come to fruition during the offseason. But I think you could keep this team together because no one's really making crazy money, especially the quarterback situation. I don't even think Mac will come on and say, we need to pay Sam Darnold $50 million a year. Absolutely not. Albeit he is Super Bowl winning quarterback, got his team to the Super Bowl. I'm not sure if he's the guy that carried this team to the Super Bowl. I think it has lots to do with McDonald. He's like a defensive wizard and this ferocious defense that's very Legion of Boom-esque. And I think if you just rely on that, I do realize that they're losing Kubiak to the Raiders, who is their offensive side, but I don't think that they're going to lose that much of a touch when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, because I think McDonald can still implement what he wants on the offensive side of the football. As far as the Patriots go, Drake May, second year, made the Super Bowl. The Patriots were favored to win 5 games this year. So I don't think anybody literally predicted anything close to this. I thought they would surpass their 5.5 wins, but I didn't expect them to go to the Super Bowl. As far as them trying to get back to this particular like Super Bowl playoff, you look at the AFC, I think Patrick Mahomes is probably going to be out the rest of the year, so you kind of kiss the baby on the Chiefs. But you got guys like Joe Burrow coming back healthy. Lamar Jackson's going to be coming back healthy. I don't know what the Steelers are going to do as far as their team. I mean, the Broncos were right there when they were literally right there, and then Bo Nix's second to last play of the game breaks his foot. It's curtains for their season. So you have them coming back. Josh Allen with Joe Brady, as Sean already mentioned, would like to see what they look like when he's the head man. So usually the AFC, I think they had a down year this year. The NFC was probably the better conference, but I think usually in the AFC they have all of those types of high star power quarterbacks, and I think those guys are going to come back and I didn't even mention Justin Herbert, and they just got McDaniel as the OC. So the Patriots, I still think they have a chance to probably win their division. I'm not sure if they're going to be favored coming into the year to be favored to win their division, but I do think they'll be up in the air for a playoff spot. And then you also have teams like Houston. Obviously, C.J. Stroud didn't play well down the stretch, but they are another team that can definitely make some noise in the AFC. So props to the Patriots. I still think they're going to be a really good team. Drake May can only get better, I think. This is like I think he's the second youngest quarterback to play in a Super Bowl. So I think he's only 23 years old. He's going to be good for years to come. I think there were just a lot of spots in this game where there were like really, really easy throws that he just couldn't make or didn't want to make. I don't think there's a throw that he can't make. I just don't know if you could have the front four could have something to do with maybe his decision making, but I think there were some throws that he could have made but just didn't. So yeah, like I said, hats off to Seattle. Hell of a year. They did it. They did it. I mean, can't really say anything. They went out there. They handled business. We'll see what they look like going into another year under Sam Darnold. We'll see what they look like without Kubiak as their OC. I think they'll be fine. They're probably going to be favored to win again, if not second favorite overall. But yeah, hats off to Seattle. They really, like Max said, I don't know if any of us had this Super Bowl prediction, the Patriots versus Seattle, to start the year.
Yeah, definitely not, because I remember when we did our season preview episode back in early September, late August, I heard a lot of Ravens, Eagles from our two Eagle panelists. Toddy, I think you threw the Niners in there. I went out into left field and I chose the Bengals, and I can't even remember the NFC team that I had in there, but I was way off. I tried to be different. Yeah, well, and I think even the quote unquote experts, like not many people, I would be shocked genuinely if I saw someone say as a prediction from the beginning of the season that either of these teams would have been in the Super Bowl. I would have been genuinely surprised. Either team, like if they hit 1 out of 2, kudos, because I would not have expected this at all. And I wanted to hit on a couple other stats and facts from the game, because Toddy, you were alluding to John Schneider and how he has just hit on so many picks as the Seahawks general manager. And before I get to that, I just wanted to read the comment that I've had going on the ticker here from Boo3D4 on Instagram. Says 49ers are hot garbage. Now that I've read that for the audio only listeners, I'm taking it off the screen because it's been up there for like 20 minutes. And so now continuing, John Schneider, he is the first GM in NFL history to win multiple Super Bowls with the same organization while having a new head coach and no players from the previous Super Bowl team, which is a pretty remarkable stat. And it just shows his staying power and why sometimes it's a good idea to keep the GM, even if you're going to bring in a new head coach. A lot of times organizations just want to do a full reset. We saw the 49ers stick with Trent Baalke for a little bit too long, but John Schneider is the primary example of why you give GMs a little bit longer of a leash sometimes, depending on what the circumstances are. Like if a coach is out there doing the best job he possibly can, kind of like Kyle Shanahan was this season with all the injuries, and I'm not saying that John Lynch is responsible for all the injuries that happened, but you guys get the point, is that if the GM is constantly making bad picks, but the head coach is doing a good job, you can see the problem, vice versa. And so I don't, yeah, it's the electrical substation that I listened to so many interviews of 49ers players during the week leading up to it with Media Row in San Francisco, and every single interviewee was asked about the substation. And there were guys like Fred Warner who downplayed it completely and was like, I've been playing for X amount of years and haven't had very many injuries until this year. Then you had a guy like Kyle Juszczyk. Yeah, and Christian McCaffrey, he also really downplayed it. But Kyle Juszczyk, on the other hand, he was doing an interview with his wife, Kristen, who has now launched a very successful fashion company related to NFL apparel. And they actually said, yeah, we've been looking into this for years. And I haven't been injured very much, but if something is making you 1% worse, wouldn't you want to know about it or try to resolve it? And Christian McCaffrey even talked about, because Fred Warner exposed how Christian said that he turns his Wi-Fi off at night for reasons related to that. And so it's all just a rabbit hole that the 49ers, they got to figure out. But I mentioned John Schneider, Sam Darnold. He led the Seahawks to become the first Super Bowl champion ever to go an entire postseason without committing a turnover. And as Adam Schefter said, what makes it even more impressive is that Seattle finished the regular season with 28 turnovers, second most in the NFL, only behind the Vikings with 30. And then you look at the Vikings and the last quarterback and offensive coordinator that the Vikings got rid of, just won the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold and Clint Kubiak. So shout out to our guy, Wes. I'm sure he is not feeling great today, given what happened with his Vikings. When it comes to the Seahawks, you look at the highest point differential in a single postseason since 2000. The Seahawks rank fourth with 55 points that they have scored more than the opposition, only behind the 2024 Eagles, the 2002 Buccaneers, and the 2000 Ravens. So it just shows how dominant the Seahawks defense was and how not making any turnovers led to them getting out to huge outcomes. And finally, I wanted to mention Kenneth Walker, who Mack is wearing the jersey of. It was kind of a blessing and a curse for Zach Charbonnet going down in the divisional round, because obviously you're losing your 1-2 punch. You never want to see a great player, or any players for that matter, get injured, especially in a devastating injury like that where it's season ending. But the blessing was it really allowed Kenneth Walker to flourish, because Emiliano, our mutual friend Colin, he will die on the hill of talking about how anytime he's had Kenneth Walker on his fantasy team, he always gets very angry because Charbonnet is constantly just stealing the touchdowns, and he's a total TD vulture. When Kenneth Walker will rush 80 yards down the field, but Zach Charbonnet is getting that touchdown. And so him getting injured really allowed Kenneth Walker to step into that true RB1 role, even though he's been the starter. I was talking with some people yesterday, and up until this run, I don't know if many people would have considered Kenneth Walker as a top 10 running back in the NFL. Now I think he is definitely a top 10 running back in the NFL, at least based on recency bias. And I say all that to point out, and if Kevin was here, we'd be doing a pop quiz. Instead, I'm just going to mention this as a fact. Kenneth Walker is the first running back to win Super Bowl MVP since Terrell Davis in 1998, the year that, Mac, I'm pretty sure, were you a 98 baby as well?
I was 97.
See, I kind of had a feeling that you might have been 97, but I wasn't sure. So ever since the year that Jaevon and I were born, and Emiliano, I think you got us beat like 95 or 96. But a running back has not won. I mean, we're all close together. We're all 90s babies who are getting hit with the meme of us mentioning the year we were born, and then a dinosaur.
Just like a dinosaur.
yeah, we're all in the same group. But yeah, Jaevon and I, our entire life, because I was born in May, he was born in July. For our entire lives, a running back has not won Super Bowl MVP until last night when Kenneth Walker III got that honor. And now he joins Terrell Davis in the category of guys who have done it out of the backfield.
I'm going to cut you off, Sean. Can you blame
that's all I had
Vikings? Can you blame the Vikings for letting Sam Darnold walk, because they had literally the year before drafted a guy in J.J. McCarthy as high as they did at 11. Obviously, he doesn't play. So you signed Sam Darnold from the 49ers in the offseason just to be like a bridge guy, probably not really expecting him to play as much. And then J.J. McCarthy ends up going down with the knee injury early on to start the season. So Sam Darnold is kind of thrusted in and goes 14-3. They get to the playoffs. Obviously, they lose to the Rams in the first round. And then the next season comes around. You're like, hey, I got this kid that I just drafted. Kind of want to see what he has. Sam Darnold's like, I kind of want to play, but he was demanding a little bit more money. Obviously, he was only making, I think it was like $10 million. And after the season that he had every right to ask for a pay raise. So for him to come out, Seattle gets him. Do you think it's kind of more? Can you blame the Vikings for like, I just drafted this kid 10th, 11th overall, versus kind of letting Sam Darnold walk? Because there's a lot of Vikings fans out there like, you should have kept Sam Darnold, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of a sticky situation.
Right. I think, honestly, if you saw the last two games from the 2024 season that Sam Darnold played in, there wasn't a lot to be excited about. And maybe it had more to do with the matchups and the types of teams he was going against, because they played, I believe, the Lions week 18 and then the Rams, obviously, the wild card. And they lost to the Rams, and we've seen he's continued to struggle with the Rams up until that NFC Championship game. I don't necessarily blame Minnesota for not wanting to spend upwards of $40 million on Sam Darnold, just because we didn't have the data at the time. We didn't, obviously we have the power of hindsight now to think that, oh wow, the Vikings were just a decent quarterback away from potentially being a playoff team. So it's always going to be hard to say that they were totally wrong in making the decision that they made, because I don't think a lot of people felt aggrieved by that just because of what we had seen from Sam Darnold. Now, if you ask me, I was never that high on JJ McCarthy coming out of college. I thought at best he could be what Sam Darnold was in 2024. So I think that's kind of the question. Maybe not the question of moving on from Sam Darnold, but did you have the right guy in the building to make that decision? And if you didn't, which jury's still out, could you have brought in a better backup for him? Now, I know Carson Wentz also went down with injury, which you can't predict either, but I don't know. It's hard. And I don't necessarily blame the Vikings and the GM for making the decision they did. But that none of that's going to bring them comfort right now.
I'll just say I don't blame the Vikings, because I think at some point you just have to go with your guy, and they chose their guy in JJ. But on the same line, I'm not giving a ton of credit to the Seahawks that they knew that Darnold was the guy that was going to take us to the Super Bowl. I don't know how you feel, Mac, but I think there are 15 quarterbacks in the NFL that could have taken this team to the Super Bowl. Winning a Super Bowl, maybe it does take a little bit more, but then we look at the game and it's like, was Darnold the difference maker? But yeah, I think the way this team was built, the culture of this team, then it begs the question, how much impact did Darnold have on the culture? But culture of this team, the way that it was built, there's 10 to 15 quarterbacks that probably could have taken this team this far.
I will say Sam Darnold was once upon a time the number 3 overall pick. That's not nothing.
The only quarterback from that draft to make it and win the Super Bowl.
Listen, I watched that Rose Bowl game too. I know why he went that high. The Jets are the Jets. And I think Emiliano, you are right in that maybe other quarterbacks could have come in and done what Darnold did. But, while he was shaky, he did have his steady moments. And in the playoffs, no turnovers again. I noticed, I kind of thought he was nervous in the Super Bowl a little bit, because he was gunning passes in where I was not expecting them. Like, there were really tight windows that could have been like multiple interceptions. So I do wonder if the big game maybe got to him in a bit, but ultimately we came out on top, so it doesn't no sense overanalyzing it right now.
Penn State?
Yes.
Against Penn State, Saquon Barkley. I remember that game.
Yeah, when I think about the Rose Bowl, I think about Christian McCaffrey absolutely tearing up the Iowa Hawkeyes when they were still relevant. Man, I still think about that to this day. It was amazing. And so now, guys, thank you for taking the time to recap Super Bowl 60. Congrats again to Mac. Jaevon and I, we just kind of have to eat it, and it sucks. Second year in a row that the Birds win. And Mac, we hope that you join us a lot more on this podcast going forward. I know it was long overdue, but at least, Jaevon, at least we won't have to hear from Mac every single week like we have with Kevin over the last year. And so that'll be nice at least. But congrats to the Seahawks. I'm just choosing to be the bigger person here. Give them their credit. Leave it alone there. Not be petty. Not be childish. Congrats to the Seahawks. You guys are the reigning champions, and that deserves credit and to be recognized as we keep things moving here on episode 181 of Stats Over Politics. Sean Holka alongside Jaevon Toddy, Mack Irvin III, and Emiliano Lara. We got one more segment for you guys before we get out of here on today's Power Hour episode, and it's regarding the NFL head coaches all having the vacancies filled now. As we know, it was about 10 vacancies coming into this offseason. That grew a little bit once the Bills got eliminated. And so now all the jobs have been filled. And I want to start out by giving credit to NFL Network reporter Stacey Dales, who is a former WNBA All-Star and Olympian, and she now is a reporter for NFL Network. And she went right up to Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak right after the game as the confetti just fell. And she's asking him, like, hey, how you feeling? Is this your last game with the Seahawks? Because all the reports leading up to it was that the Raiders were locking in on hiring Clint Kubiak, that they were negotiating a 5-year contract. How much money are they going to pay him? All this and that, but it didn't officially become official until the Seahawks season came to an end, as he wanted to show respect to the mission that his current team was on. And so shout out to Stacey Dales, because she got that report on the record. She got him to confirm, yeah, I'm going to Vegas. And so now all the head coaching vacancies have been filled. So for those of you who may not be keeping up over the last month or so, this is a quick rundown, and then we're each going to give our prediction for who will be the most successful from this hiring class and who will be the least successful. So starting out, the Falcons hired Kevin Stefanski after he got fired by the Browns. That's a head scratcher in itself. Jesse Minter got hired by the Baltimore Ravens away from the Los Angeles Chargers, where he was the defensive coordinator. You have Jeff Hafley, who was with the Packers. I believe he was their defensive coordinator, and now he got hired as the Dolphins head coach. That was a big head scratcher for me, just kind of alluding to what I'm going to be talking about later. John Harbaugh got hired by the New York Football Giants after being with the Ravens for a very long time. Bob Saleh, Toddy and I's guy, former defensive coordinator, two-time defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. He is now moving on to another head coaching opportunity. Hopefully this one goes better, as he's now with the Tennessee Titans, building a bit of an all-star cast on his coaching staff as well. The Pittsburgh Steelers replaced their longtime head coach, Mike Tomlin, with another Mike, another Super Bowl winning coach, Mike McCarthy. And I thought it was kind of special just because Mike McCarthy is a yinzer to his core, and so him getting that job meant a lot to him. If you haven't seen the press conference, check it out. As we talked about earlier, the Buffalo Bills hired Joe Brady, who was their offensive coordinator, which is really interesting because the owner was saying that the coaching staff was the problem. They fired Sean McDermott, but apparently the guy who was right under him wasn't. We'll get to that a little bit later. Todd Monken got hired as the Cleveland Browns' next head coach, which led to Jim Schwartz leaving. Jim Schwartz, who was their defensive coordinator, thought he had a chance to get that job. Instead, they go with Todd Monken, who was the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. Then he agreed to become the Giants offensive coordinator with John Harbaugh until the Browns decided to make them their head coach. As we just talked about, Stacey Dales confirmed the report that Clint Kubiak is going to be the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders after being the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. And Mike LaFleur, brother of Matt LaFleur, Packers head coach, he got hired as the Arizona Cardinals head coach after being an offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. So that's all the moves. Jaevon, I'm going to start it off with you. Let's go around the panel one time and talk about who we think will be most successful. So for you, Jaevon, after all those coaches I just named off, who do you think will have the most success 10 years from now when we're looking back on this massive hiring class? Because it's not often that we get coaches being hired and fired in the double digits. So who do you think will be the most successful from all these guys in the future?
Yeah, a lot of turnover. There's a couple of coaching jobs that I think we'll probably see a lot of guys kind of turning around. The best I'll probably say is Jesse Minter from that's coming from the Chargers, going to the Ravens. Guy came from the McDonald tree. So you might see something similar. I think the one thing with the Ravens is what they've been missing is their defense hasn't been what we've known them being when they had Ed Reed, when they had Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, all those guys. I think Mitchell can bring that same tenacity, ferociousness back to this Ravens defense. And you have a guy, I don't know, Lamar Jackson who's won 2 MVPs, all pros, Derrick Henry, Hall of Fame running back in the backfield. You got guys like Zay Flowers, who have already been putting up points. I think they averaged 30 points this year. And you can bring that in with and Minter can add to the defensive prowess that McDonald brings to what Seattle has, and you bring that to Baltimore, that could be very scary and has a lot of potential. Obviously, Bob Saleh, I think he can definitely have an ultimate impact. One thing he said in his press conference was he wasn't calling plays in New York when he was the head coach, but I thought was kind of weird. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Ulbrich was calling the defensive plays. He was kind of more of a CEO head coach. You had him, and then you had Daboll, who before Daboll was hired as a head coach, once upon a time did get Daniel Jones to the playoffs. Let's not forget that. And then he was Josh Allen's OC when Josh Allen wasn't really Josh Allen yet. He was the OC for the Bills, and that ended up ultimately getting the head coaching job for the Giants, where he was later obviously fired. So I think that OC DC combo can be basically what the Titans need. Obviously, the Titans need a lot more, like better players. But I think when you have a guy in Cam Ward, you got guys like a big Jeff Simmons on the D line, All Pro Jeff, and if you can have a solid draft and maybe a good free agency. I mean, Titans aren't really paying anybody, so they can bring guys in. And you can combine Saleh and Daboll, you can have a lot of success. Another team that a lot of people aren't really going to look at is I think the Raiders can be that question mark team. Obviously, they're going to add. You're going to add Fernando Mendoza to his roster. Let's just say, call spade a spade. Fernando Mendoza is going to be a Las Vegas Raider. You can look back 2 months later from now. Oh, you see the future. We all saw what we saw in that playoff run from Indiana. So you add a guy in Mendoza, and you have a guy already in position with Ashton Genty in the backfield. You have guys like Trey Tucker on the outside. Obviously, you have Brock Bowers, who, when healthy, is probably the best tight end in football. And you add a Kubiak to this system. That offense can probably change overnight. Now, there is another side of the football that the Raiders have to address, and they got to tear it all the way down from scratch. You probably, according to reports, Jay Glazer, very trusted source, Max Crosby is probably going to be gone. So I would imagine you'd get a bunch of picks for Max Crosby, and you use those draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. Similar to the Titans, the Raiders are not paying anybody. You can retool that offensive line. We saw with the Bears this year. Ben Johnson came in day one. We're getting this guard. We're getting the center. We're getting this tackle. They retooled their offensive line in one offseason. And we saw what it did for their run game. It did absolute wonders. Now, Ashton Genty, very high draft pick, had the absolute worst offensive line. Like, it couldn't be any worse. It was me, you, Mack, and Emiliano out there blocking for Ashton Genty. So I feel like with this offseason, they should use this to tool their O-line, probably go into the draft, get a bunch of guys. And defense is something that they will need to rely heavily on. You probably might have to sign some guys in the offseason on the outside for receiver's sake, but you have Brock Bowers. So I think the Raiders probably won't be a playoff team, but I think that they'll pop a little bit more with their offensive prowess, getting a guy in Kubiak. You have Fernando Mendoza, you have a Brock Bowers, and you have Ashton Genty. So I think that if you can retool your offensive line, you might see a little bit of a pop from an offensive standpoint. I don't know how good their whole team will be because your defense has to be good for you to be a successful team. But I feel like their offense will be retooled pretty immensely when you get an offensive head coach in. I will add one more thing. I've probably taken up the whole entire time. I think the Giants are going to be good. I think Harbaugh's a really good coach. The Giants have been starving for stability, and I feel like they haven't gotten that since Eli was there. I mean, even when Daniel Jones was there, they had the 1 year with Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll. They had that 1 year. But ever since then, it's kind of just been a ghost. Don't really know what's going on. I do love the Giants' front four. Similar to Seattle, they have a really good front four. You have guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, or not DeMarcus Lawrence. They have The Giants' front four, I think their defense is really solid. I think offensively, they have a couple of things they could work on, but obviously you have Jackson Dart and you have a Cam Scatterboo that can make plays for you offensively. And like I said, similar to the Giants, I think Harbaugh can obviously they pretty much every single year when he was with the Ravens, they were in the playoffs. So the Giants were like, yeah, I'll take that. You say we can get into the playoffs every year? I'm starving for that. So I think the Giants will be good. I've told Kevin this. I was like, your guys' division got better overnight. Obviously, Kevin is the Eagles fan, so I don't know if the NFC East will be as easy of a path as it's been for them the last couple of years. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl last year. So, yeah, those are the kind of the teams that I see that can probably make something happen.
Emiliano, how about you? Who do you think will be the most successful head coaching candidate from this cycle?
Yeah, I was going to go with the Raiders. So I'll be honest. I think that more than anything, what the Raiders have needed for a really long time is some stability and culture. And so, we don't know what Clint Kubiak's going to be like as a head coach in Las Vegas. But I think, I was looking at their roster and their salary over the next couple of years. And just based on players that they're going to have signed, through 2028, they're going to turn over that entire roster in the next couple of years. Guys like Max Crosby, who have been a staple of the Raiders for a really long time, even guys like Colton Miller, who's been a standout tackle for them over the last 6+ years, I believe, are not going to be there by the time they sign Fernando Mendoza's first non-rookie contract. So I think the Raiders have the greatest chance 5 years from now. We look back, QBX, maybe one of the best signings. I definitely don't want to underestimate what the Titans are doing. I think, Cam Ward, was a part of a draft class that got a lot of hate, and so I think that, he kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Not saying that, he was standout or anything, but I just think, again, culture really is everything right now. Being able to build a culture around some of these players that are coming in, already being millionaires is kind of one of the bigger things that I look for in a head coach at this point. And I think Saleh maybe has a chance to do that. He got the short end of the stick with the Jets for a lot of reasons. And so I think that the Titans and the Raiders a few years from now are going to be the two that we look back on, and maybe the only two that are still coaching there, with how things turn around so fast in the NFL, who knows?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. And Mac, for you, who do you think is going to be most successful from this hiring cycle? I have one guy who has already been mentioned that I could guess you may believe will be successful. But as we were talking about on last week's episode, I was not a believer in Mike Macdonald at all. And we see the result. So who are you predicting will be successful from this cycle the most?
For me, I'm looking at who the person hired is, like what their path is from, but not only that, but where they're landing in, what team is best positioned to have sustained long-term success. And for me, the two that line up perfectly is Jesse Minter going to the Ravens. I think you look there, you see how bad the defense was, and that was a big part of the reason why they didn't make the playoffs this year. They had a lot of injuries on the offensive side of the ball. You probably need to get Lamar another wide receiver, maybe one that has reliable hands apart from Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, but that's neither here nor there. But I feel like the Ravens, when they moved on from Jar Harbaugh, I felt like, okay, this is the best opening in the National Football League. And so whoever gets this is going to be best positioned to go forward into the future. And I think you look at what Jesse, Chargers defense coordinator, it doesn't sound all that hype when you hear it. But when you look at his tree and you look at how long he's been on the defensive side of the ball, and when you look at the candidates that were out there, there wasn't exactly a blow you away candidate this cycle, right? There wasn't somebody I guess you could say Harbaugh, but obviously you're the Ravens, so that doesn't really count for you. But there wasn't really somebody everybody was falling over themselves to get, at least not until later in the cycle. And so I feel like Minter is best positioned to have sustained long-term success. I am interested to see what Kubiak does with the Raiders because they've got, a good foundation to work off of. They're going to have their franchise quarterback should he elect to take him. If not, they can fall back and collect a boatload of picks for future seasons. So I am curious to see how that one works out too. The person I think will have the least amount of success or the most trouble, honestly, my pick is going to go to Mike McCarthy because I don't know what the Steelers were thinking choosing to succeed Mike Tomlin with Mike McCarthy. I think Mike McCarthy is a decent coach. I mean, we saw the work he did with the Cowboys. It was good, but not enough to get over the hump. Obviously, I think Dallas made the right choice in letting his contract expire and trying to move on to somebody else. Whether Schottenheimer's the right option, well, I watched him in Seattle, so I would say no. But, I understand the decision, why they did what they did. But I don't understand it from the Steelers. I think if you wanted to move on, well, it wasn't their decision to move on, obviously. Tomlin stepped down. But if you're going to go into this change, this was your opportunity to do something radical, do something interesting to kind of generate interest and buzz and potentially go in a different direction. Mike McCarthy feels like a lesser version of Mike Tomlin to me, and I don't foresee him being there for that long, and I don't see them having that level of success either.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm rooting for Mike McCarthy just because I think it's a nice storyline, but everything you just said, Mac, was very valid, and they're excuse me, they're basically running it back from Green Bay 15 years ago, and they got them one Super Bowl, but probably should have resulted in a lot more. And that's if Aaron Rodgers even returns, because that's the biggest question mark now. When it comes to who I think will be the most successful, and forgive me, guys, if my memory isn't serving correctly, but a name that I was surprised to not hear was Kevin Stefanski with the Atlanta Falcons, because he was a 2-time Coach of the Year in Cleveland of all places. And we're talking Cleveland football. Toddy, did you mention Kevin Stefanski? Did I miss that?
No, I was just going to say your quarterback is injured again, and he has both ACLs repaired. Who's your quarterback?
That's what the NFL draft is for, because the news just came out that they are moving on from Kirk Cousins. They will be releasing him when the new league year starts. So they're going to try to start the transition of getting off of his contract. I believe that there will still be some dead money there, but they're starting the transition. When it comes to Michael Penix, it's unfortunate. Like it's remarkable that he even made it to the NFL and was a top 10 pick after suffering multiple ACL injuries in college. And so kudos to him for making it from Indiana to Washington to the NFL. I'm happy that he even got to this point. He's earned some generational money for his family. When it comes to his NFL future, that is very uncertain. But we talked about the Raiders with the fact that, okay, they're drafting a quarterback. They already have a dynamic running back. They already have a dynamic tight end. I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts is Brock Bowers, but Bijan Robinson is arguably the best running back in the NFL. When they had Arthur Smith, the FedEx nepotism hire, everyone was just waiting. Hey, and I shouldn't be talking
like that.
I realized it right after it came out of my mouth. I was like, I got to stop talking shit about that guy because now he's the Buckeyes offensive coordinator. But when Arthur Smith was the head coach in Atlanta, like everyone was just waiting for him to unlock that offense. And then they decide to hire a defensive coach from Los Angeles in Raheem Morris. And Raheem Morris, like, he kind of fumbled the bag this year. Like, the opportunities were there. They had a really bad stretch in the middle of the season that did them in, because then they end up finishing tied for winning the division. But because of the tiebreakers that happened earlier in the season, there was no chance of them winning the division in the last game, even though they won their last game. And they're the reason why the Buccaneers didn't. But my point is, you have a guy like Bijan Robinson and Mack and Vaughn's guy, Drake London from USC, Kyle Pitts, he started to come alive this season. I will never forget. It was like week 13, something like that, Thursday night football, and he dropped a 40-piece on my bench because it's been years of not believing in him. I'm just saying, if anyone will unlock the offensive pieces that this Falcons team has, I believe in Kevin Stefanski, because Kevin Stefanski found a way to have success in Cleveland. We talk a lot about the New York Jets and how they almost ruined Sam Darnold and plenty of other players along the way. Cleveland has been the place where football careers, I will say, where football careers have gone to die for years, even before the Browns moved to Baltimore. And so the Browns should have never let Stefanski go in the first place. They realized that once they were trying to even interview candidates. And a guy like Mike McDaniel says, I'd actually rather go be an offensive coordinator in Southern California than even take a second interview for your position, because I don't need my second opportunity to end up flaming out because it's in Cleveland and then I don't get another shot. I'm just saying, Kevin Stefanski, to me, is an underrated hiring. I know he was one of the first guys to get hired in this cycle, but I think Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta is a bit of a sleeper. I'm also a believer in John Harbaugh in New York, Cam Scatterbo, Rio Linda, California, Jackson Dart, if he can learn to slide. And obviously Malik Neighbors, who Emiliano, was it you who had a Malik Neighbors on your fantasy football team in my league, and you put him on the trade block after he got hurt, and everyone's like wondering what happened? Why is Malik Neighbors? And then I saw 5 minutes later, I was like, torn ACL. That's why he did it.
Come get him, discount rate.
Yeah, it's not dynasty. But yeah, I'm a believer in the Giants, and I'm rooting for my guy Robert Saleh. I think that he was one of the many people who fell victim to the New York Jets, and so I'm rooting for Bob Saleh. I think John Harbaugh will be successful in New York, New Jersey, and Stefanski to me is an underrated hiring. And as Grey Wolf, Mac and I are probably the only ones who will understand this reference, but it's a WWE reference. As Grey Wolf, good to see you. We see you in the comments after a couple weeks. We appreciate you tuning in. Grey Wolf says, say his name and he appears. I believe in Stefanski. And as Mac clapped, because that there's a guy in WWE now. He used to be in TNA. His name is Joe Hendry. That's his gimmick. You say his name, he appears. I believe in Joe Hendry. Nevertheless, keeping things moving because I know we are running out of time now. I wanted to say real quickly, I'm not a believer in Jeff Hafley. I didn't understand that hiring, especially when you go from a guy like Mike McDaniel to Jeff Hafley. I don't get that. And maybe this is just me being a hater within the division. He could end up being a tremendous coach, but I'm not really a believer in Mike LaFleur either. The Cardinals just have not had success for a very long time. We saw how elite the NFC West was this past season, and Mike LaFleur was part of that as he was in LA with the Rams. But the Cardinals just seem to muck it up constantly. And every team in the division started 2-0. Cardinals fell off a cliff after that. I think it's going to be very challenging for Mike LaFleur in Arizona because I was a believer in Jonathan Gannon when the Cardinals hired him, and we saw how that worked out. So I'm not a believer in Jeff Hafley. I'm not a believer in Mike LaFleur. Emiliano, who are you not a believer of?
I got to go against you. I'm not huge on the Falcons. I think Stefanski is a great coach, but I just think the Falcons have made a few too many poor GM decisions. They don't have a first-round pick this year. They don't have a first-round pick next year, I believe. They traded both of those. It's hard to protect your stud RB, your stud receiver, and your stud tight end without first-round picks to develop offensive line, defensive line. Shout out to our Eagles fans, O-line, D-line, Howie. I just think that that's how teams are built, and it appears that they've taken a swing and a miss on a couple of their edge rushers over the past couple of years. So I just think, all credit to Stefanski for winning Coach of the Year, but you had Myles Garrett, you had a legit DB core, some great linebackers, and I think that you're leaving that and you're going to a much worse roster overall. I know that might sound like a lot considering how bad the Browns are, but yeah, I just don't believe in the Falcons whatsoever.
Also,
That's fair.
shout out Terry Fontenot, the former Falcons GM, who traded this year's first last year for James Pierce, who is now facing charges.
Oh boy.
Yeah, as he decided to hit his beautiful WNBA star girlfriend, Rakia Jackson. She was in her car. He was in his car. He decided to hit her car with his car. And I think I saw that he also fled police. So
Yes,
that's a great move.
Probably gonna get released.
Yeah, and
think-
it's crazy because he was a finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year, and now we see what has happened. Toddy, real quickly, do you have time to tell us who you think will be the worst, or do you got to get out of here? I know you had a hard out.
I think it's probably Todd Monken. I mean, if you just look at all the people that tried to become the Browns head coaching job, everybody that they were interviewing, they're like, I'm good. I'll be an OC. I'm good. I'll go be a DC over here. Like, there were people that were bowing out, like Stefanski even bowed out of or not Stefanski. I forgot. I think I already said McDaniel. He bowed out of the head coaching position. So it was kind of just like, somebody please take this job, and everybody was like, I don't know. I think I think Jimmy Haslam just can't get in his own way. Like, he's just gonna meddle at some point in time, going into it. So, I mean, if you look at their defense was really good. Amelia already mentioned. You had, obviously, Myles Garrett break the sack record. You had, you have guys like Denzel Ward on the outside. Shador Sanders, obviously. Really like the running back room as well. Dylan Sampson is a guy back there. You have Harold Landry out there making plays. And they just have the Defensive Rookie of the Year. What was the name? Swearinger? I
think you got it. It's Swearinger, yeah.
I don't think it's Swearinger something, but
I'll look it up real quick.
I think the Browns team is good. I still know Todd Buck is a really good coach, so that's kind of be where it all kind of falls down.
I mean, Toddy, you were pretty close. It's Carson Swessinger. So very close.
There we go.
Tough last name. So congrats to him. He won the award and prevented James Pierce from winning the award and then doing what he ultimately did. And so we got to get out of here. Thank you to Mack and Emiliano for joining us once again. Shout out to Big Toddy, a.k.a. Big Mun, who says Cousins is going back to Minnesota. I got to check in with Wes to see how he feels about that. But that's going to do it for episode 181 of Stats Over Politics. Congrats again to the Seahawks. Make sure to give us a like on YouTube. It helps us a lot. And if you enjoy the podcast, hit subscribe to get notifications when we go live. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Stats Over Politics, and on X at Stats or Politics. See all the great content Kevin's putting out there. And make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on all podcast platforms. If you're enjoying the show, give us those 5 stars. We'd really appreciate it. As you guys have been tuned into episode 181 of Stats Over Politics, for my guys, Jaevon Toddy, Kevin Dent, Kaz Johnson, Alex Dent, Gary Singh, Mac Irvin III, and Emiliano Lara. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next week on another episode of Stats Over Politics. Peace.